Welcome to Wisdom Matrix 1111. Today we dive into Uell Stanley Andersen's powerful wisdom on the power of choice, drawn from his classic masterpiece, The Magic in Your Mind. Andersen, known for his wisdom on personal development and the mind's influence on our reality, explores how the choices we make shape the very fabric of our existence. Our lives are the result of the decisions we make, and often we don't realize how deeply these choices, driven by both our conscious and subconscious minds, impact our reality. Well, whether you're aware of it or not, every thought, every action, and every moment of decision contributes to the person you become and the life you lead. Understanding and harnessing the power of your choices can transform your life. And being mindful of the roles of your conscious and subconscious minds helps you align your choices and decisions with your true desires. So let's dive in. The power of choice. Ask 100 people if their lives had turned out to be what they wanted them to be, and probably not one in the 100 would answer affirmatively. Most people live dissatisfied lives, unfulfilled in most aspects of their natures, but unable to decide what these aspects are or how to go about fulfilling them. They have turned out to be what they are because they have not chosen for themselves, but have allowed events and circumstances to decide for them. They have been molded by a million different sensual stimuli, and they will continue to be so molded as long as they fail to exercise their power of decision. The only true action, man's only true action, is his exercise of choice. How he grows and matures and the kind of person he becomes reside in the countless decisions he makes as he journeys through the years. The power of his choice is that it makes him what he becomes. It is the hub of a wheel of countless spokes, each spoke representing a way to be taken, and a man stands always in the center of an infinite number of possibilities. If his choice is made freely and consciously, then a man is enlightened and is consciously molding his own life. If his choice is made as a result of emotional response to the circumstances in which he finds himself, then a man is an automaton and life is molding him. To become free of reaction and to initiate thought from within is the evolutionary goal of mankind. Once a person takes a step in this direction, no matter how small or tentative, he is forever unchained. He has broken out of the reactionary prison of sensual response and has discovered the completely transforming fact that there resides within him a power to grow in any direction he chooses. A man can choose what he will think, regardless of the circumstances around him. He can choose whatever his consciousness will be focused upon, and thereby he can determine the direction in which he will grow. Whatever he thinks about, he becomes in the end, and it is this astounding law that enables individuals to rise above their environment. A saint may emerge from the slums, a rich man from poverty, an enlightened mind out of ignorance, the leader of a nation out of an obscure log cabin. The history of mankind is a record of the overcoming of obstacles. The person who refuses to accede to the limitations of his environment is led into such aspiration by the images that form in his mind. He wants something. Wanting visualizes. Visualizing is led into the action that will lead to materialization of his desire. Linear thinking. For the most part, people are unaware of the fact that their lives are decided by the thoughts they think. They are inclined to feel that circumstances are either beyond their control or that power over them is gained only by an intrinsic knowledge of their physical workings. The ability of a man to affect his environment by the way that he feels has largely been lost sight of in the Western world. Western education teaches us to be linear thinkers. We gain the overall idea of a thing by examining it piece by piece. Feeling or intuition is largely ignored. Education in the older societies of the East aimed at grasping an intuitional sense of the basic idea of a thing. The Eastern athlete works at his event by feel, trying to grasp a sense of the entire motion. The Western athlete is more likely to break down his event into a number of correlated small actions: a leg bent here, an arm crooked there, a hip turned here, a shoulder turned there. As a result, he tends to lose feel, and only constant repetition and practice allows proper action to seep into his subconscious so that eventually he can perform unthinkingly. It is very difficult to teach someone to dance by drawing diagrams of the proper steps upon the floor, but a man who instinctively moves in rhythm to music hardly needs to be taught at all, so apt a pupil is he. The Eastern musician uses only a rough notation on his sheet of music to remind him of the melody, preferring to play by feel. The more complicated method of Western musicians is represented by a double scale of notes and half notes, delineating completely both melody and harmony. This is not an apology for Western methods of education, for the West produces its share of inspirational thinkers and instinctive athletes. This is only to say that the linear method of thinking, while proven effective in scientific investigation, is certainly not the only or even the best approach to be used by the individual in dealing with his surroundings. Our contacts in our daily lives are so profuse that we never can hope to understand them by trying to understand their parts. We must rely for our perceptions on an awareness of each thing achieved by an intuitional understanding of it. Intuitive thinking. It is often said that banking is a cold-blooded, logical business based entirely upon reason, but one of the leading bankers in the Southwest recently electrified his audience when he told how his bank processed loan applications. Oh, the paperwork was done all right. A financial statement substantiated, receipts and expenditures examined, accounts receivable assessed, a record made of the applicant's background and capability in his business. But when all these factors had been considered, the question that the president always asked the examining officer was this: what kind of feeling do you get? If the examining officer reported a favorable feeling, the loan was made. If he stated he had mixed feelings, the loan was tabled to be reconsidered later. If he said he had negative feelings, the loan was denied. So in one of our leading financial institutions, ultimate decisions are being reached on the basis of intuition rather than the reasoning power of the mind. It is interesting to note that the loss ratio of this particular bank is the lowest in the Southwest. In our society in the past, intuition simply has not been considered academically and philosophically respectable. Thus, we have hardly begun to realize its possibilities. No doubt within its scope is the potential synthesis of all our more cumbersome calculations like mathematics, theology, metaphysics, logic, when we have learned to exercise our power of choice and to leave the working out of details to a greater intelligence than is embodied in our conscious minds. We will have arrived at a position of complete psychic effectiveness. The power of choice is inseparably allied with the power to perceive. Things influence us according to the possibilities that we see in them, and we obviously cannot make a choice concerning that which we do not see. All possibilities are inherent in every situation, but we see only those which our limited consciousness is able to perceive. The wider that consciousness, the more possibilities are apparent, and the more significant become the choices open to us. To the Supreme, all possibilities are actualities. The secret self is engaged in creating infinite multiplicity out of its own essential oneness, and this is its delight, its inscrutable play. To the human being laid down amidst this incessant change, it is of paramount importance not to become static and to seek constant growth, so that the field of choice widens through the lifetime. The exercise of divinity. The man who knows only one thing exercises no choice. He proceeds along a single path because he sees no other. All around him is an unknown forest, and to his limited vision it would be unthinkable for him to veer off the pathway before him. Knowledge illuminates. The more we understand about our environment, the less strange that environment appears. The more our consciousness expands, the more likely we are to perceive the myriad pathways that lead off the road we currently are following. There are as many ways to arrive at salvation and effectiveness as there are different people. The human soul is a direct opening into the world of things from the secret presence of universal self, incomplete, yes, partially manifested, yes, embarked upon a self-seeking journey called life, and this is the drama of existence and evolution being played out upon this mortal sphere. To choose is to exercise divinity within. It is choice alone that is indicative of higher spiritual and mental development. By it we recognize both intellect and character. The person who is able to transcend the limitations and blandishments of the sensual world stands like a colossus on the evolutionary stage of life. He has likened himself to God by uncovering essential freedom within, through deciding the direction in which he will grow. Choice always presupposes sacrifice, for one does not decide in favor of one thing without deciding against another. Nothing is ever achieved or gained without giving up something else. It is this law of sacrifice under which all things live, by which they grow and evolve and aspire. The acceptance and knowledge of sacrifice alleviates much pain, for when we truly understand that we can have one thing only by giving up another, we hold on to all possessions with loose hands, prepared to let them go at any time. They do not belong to us alone. They are ideas proceeding out of universal mind, and therefore under the mutual ownership of everyone. Pain and growth. Life sometimes seems to bend us terrifically, to put us under a strain we scarcely are able to bear, to involve us in conflicts that are beyond our scope to solve. But we are what we are only because we aspire to be greater, and the obstacles and the pain we meet with in life are only the result of our efforts to break out of the encysting shell of the ego and to grow outward in effectiveness and understanding. The archer, writes Khalil Gibran, sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. The ends of things do not reveal themselves to the finite mind of man, are only partially available to his intuitive faculties, and then only insofar as he understands that life's goals and methods are in the hands of a greater power than he. His real vocation is to fathom his relationship to this power, to develop complete faith and trust in it, to realize that nothing rests in his own hands except the determination of the direction in which he will grow. Choice implies freedom, and whether man is free or an automaton has long been a favorite argument of religious sects and philosophers. Any power capable of creating the world and overseeing the orderly process of evolution must know exactly where it is going and how it intends to get there. Its course cannot possibly be altered by any one of the finite minds it has created. All the events that have happened in the world must have been preordained, for only through their orderly occurrence has it been possible for life to take the direction it has taken. Yet within the absolutely rigid scope of the occurrence of these events, the individual is free, because he has innate within him the power to assume any of the roles that have to be played within any event, and it is he himself who chooses in the end the role he will play. Since the universal self creates all things from itself, it is in actual truth all things, and therefore does not consider life in terms of people, but only in terms of events. Events would approximate thoughts in the mind of a supreme being, whose split into myriad manifestations would be to ensure that it participated in all areas of each event in a form best suited to that participation. Thus, the secret self permeates all events, and the countless forms it assumes, the multiplicity of masks that it dons to play its various roles, appear separate and unique only to other incompletely manifested beings, never to itself. Freeing psychic energy. Our egoistic sense of separateness is an illusion deliberately fostered in our mental and psychic makeup, so that we are able to perform within the scope of the kind of people we are. Yet there is no absolute decree that we must do so, for at the same time that the illusion was fostered in us, power to break it was implanted also. By recognizing our ability to condition our own consciousness, we can expand that consciousness to encompass any role we choose to play, and that is why we inherently are free and why each man carries within him power to master his own fate. Decision looses a terrific psychic energy. It frees within us potentialities and possibilities we are not even aware of. To make up your mind is a wondrous thing. It directs you toward your mental image, sets you on the path to its realization with an energy that springs out of subterranean recesses. Whatever you do, you will do twice as well if you make up your mind what you wish to accomplish. Even such a simple thing as trying to cross a street becomes easier once you make up your mind that you will not attempt it until there is a break in the traffic. You will not stamp the pavement then, apprehensively watching the approaching cars with an eye toward making a sudden spurt. You will know that such energy is wasted. You will stand patiently, serene and sure, because you have made up your mind. Every task in life can be likened to this simple illustration. The man who enters into activity without making up his mind what he wants to do and how he wishes to accomplish it wastes his energies considering unsuitable possibilities as he proceeds. Some people say that to make up your mind gives you tunnel vision. You never alter course because you cannot see your surroundings. But all possibilities are inherent in all situations at all times. They exist in each situation before we enter it. Only those possibilities appear to us that we are able to envisage in our minds, but the picture we have should be the result of our choice. People to whom possibilities appear other than the one they set out to accomplish are those who have not made definite decisions. They have allowed the images in their minds to change, and this changing alters the situation in which they find themselves. Decide, and the tools are given. Decision is such an important part of everyday living. The coach before his team in the locker room attempts to inculcate in each member of that team a decision to win. Failure to make this decision is almost certain to result in defeat, for without it, the pictures that form in the mind are too easily changed in favor of defeat when negative circumstances develop. When you decide to accomplish something, you mentally toughen yourself to undergo the rigors and privations necessary to attaining the goal. This, above all, calls for tough-mindedness. The athlete who makes up his mind that he will swim the English Channel has to make up his mind at the same time that he will continue swimming, no matter how tired he gets. If he makes a decision to swim the channel, and that decision does not include a knowledge of the tiredness he is bound to encounter, then he has not truly made a decision at all, and the first time tiredness seeps through to his consciousness, pictures form of not swimming the channel, and he is finished. The kind of mental picture that assures success is the kind that is set into the mind with a conviction that is unshakable, that survives all onslaughts, obstacles, detours. Such inner conviction inspires great courage and energy. It is the mental picture held by all who achieve and accomplish, who get things done. Many people think they want things, but simply do not have sufficient desire to maintain their mental image in the face of negative circumstances. One has to want something badly in order to persevere in the face of misfortune and defeat. If we accept the sidetracking of our plans as evidence that they never will be realized, then it is a certainty that we never will accomplish anything. No path is easy, except one that leads downhill. If we aspire, we must climb, and climbing takes effort and sweat and a willingness to continue in the face of all difficulties. A man climbs a mountain not just because the mountain is there, but because he wants to get to the top. It is this inner instinct to overcome obstacles, to rise above circumstance, to win out over all odds, that has carried life on its triumphal emergence from amoeba to spaceman. Mental toughness. We have to be tough with ourselves because it is easy to sink into lethargy and forget our aspirations. If we want to hitch a ride on life's express and really go somewhere, we have to be prepared to be shaken up en route. We have to know we will undergo pain, and we have to be prepared to endure it. All of us are inclined to be too soft with ourselves. We want to be sure that we don't work too hard, that we guard against tension. But the truth is that a man makes himself strong by lifting weights, by entering conflict. We achieve physical health by exercise, by the constant use of our bodies to reach some goal. We achieve mental health by the same path, by keeping our mental efforts bent on learning, by always seeking to grow. Sleep is a panacea and one of nature's wonders, but worlds are never conquered by men who lie abed, only by those who are out in the world and doing. Men of purpose never have to decide between action and lassitude. The image in a man's mind, if it is one of accomplishment, propels him into action. Purpose, however, is more significant than just accomplishment. Lack of purpose can destroy a man, bring sickness, alcoholism. It is purpose that holds the organism together. When that purpose disappears, the organism begins to disintegrate. Men who retire from active lives are excellent illustrations. Puttering around the garden, playing golf and fishing are insufficient purpose to hold a man together in his later years. The human organism was not built for enjoyment, but for accomplishment. When we focus ourselves on pleasure-seeking ends, it is not long before we disintegrate both intellectually and physically. Even our senses become surfeited, and we are no longer able to enjoy our pleasures. The man who works all his life toward the end of retirement usually is frustrated and confused after 2 or 3 years of enforced leisure and seeks desperately for some way to get back into harness. Usually, however, his disintegration during this period has been rapid, and he no longer can make a place for himself in the world of achievement. Then he becomes embittered and lonely, and old age really sets in. How much better if he stays on the job in the first place, if not in the same job, then in another found on retiring, so that he can continue to live each day with a purpose, so that he can feel part of the great human effort to progress, so that his abilities and talents do not rust and disintegrate, but are kept sharp by constant use. Use or lose. There is a law that is apparent throughout all life. Simply stated, it is use or lose. If we put our right arm in a cast for 3 months, it has shriveled to almost nothing when the cast is taken off. Only months of regular exercise will restore it to normality. As we grow older and our lives become more sedentary, we cease to put regular strain on our muscles, and they become flabby and flaccid. Abdomens tend to protrude, fat gathers on hips and thighs, and if we are forced to run across the street, we are out of breath and fear a heart attack. We lose our physical condition through failure to use the muscles of the body, and as a consequence, we are easy prey for disease and malfunction. Regular and systematic use of our muscles prevents this, so with the more intangible parts of our natures. We must use our courage, or it deserts us. We must use our determination, or it leaves us. We must exercise our power of decision, or we soon find that we have none. Taking a mental stand on things is not only important to success and achievement, but is also basic to mental health. The man who never knows where he stands and allows himself to be swayed on every issue is bound to put enormous strain on his emotional makeup, for he is led from peak to valley of victory and defeat without the slightest idea of what motivates him or what causes each circumstance to be attracted to him. Faith in oneself and one's destiny is the seed from which all decision springs. Doubt is the essence of old age and death. Cynicism, pessimism, and despair are harbingers of failure, disease, and disaster. All things spring from mental images and emotional projections, and the ability to decide, to make up one's mind, is automatic to the man who sees his unity with all creatures and his umbilical connection with the secret self. To be unable to make up one's mind, no matter how trivial the problem, is an act of cowardice and contaminates the soul. To be unable to come to a decision is in fact a kind of quitting, a sort of refusal to enter conflict, and mentally dams up the flow of energy that proceeds into the individual from out of the universal, retarding, limiting, bringing about dissolution and decay. To be unable to make up one's mind implies a moral weakness. Such lethargy is not to be coddled, but to be overcome. You will not conquer fear by acceding to it, only by meeting it head-on, and if you do, your victory is assured. For fear itself is a coward and never stands before a direct onslaught. Making your own luck. Whatever you are afraid to do, do it, and you will be startled that you no longer are afraid. Whatever you are unable to decide, decide it, and you will be amazed how correct your decision has been. It is never the rightness or wrongness of our decisions that we are afraid of, but the fact that once we are committed to them, we must stand and fight for them. It is the shying away from conflict that renders us unable to make up our minds. It is easy to lose your temper, to loaf and be mentally lazy, to eat what you want and as much as you want, to go into debt, to feel sorry for yourself, to go down and down, to put the blame elsewhere. But it takes courage to keep your temper and to be patient, to exercise and keep your body fit, to push your business and save your money, to say no, to accept complete responsibility for your own actions, to have faith, not to worry. A sign on the wall of many football locker rooms says, "A winner never quits, and a quitter never wins." It sometimes seems that nothing more is going on in life than that nature constantly tests us to see if we are afraid. There are cycles of good and bad luck, to be sure. Every card player knows them and plays his hands accordingly. Such proverbs as, "It never rains but what it pours," and "misfortunes never come singly," are indicative of mankind's age-old recognition of streaks of good and bad fortune. Nature deals us her crudest blows when she desires to make us grow. Once we see the logic of this, we never again will quit in the face of adversity. When luck is running against you, that is the time to play harder, to cinch up your belt, pluck up your courage, smile, and be unafraid. That is the time to muster that little extra bit of mental alertness. Stick in there and fight. No matter how bleak the prospect, no matter how dismal the outlook, stay in there. Keep doing your very best, and above all things, be unafraid. Visualize steel up your spine. Call upon your inner resources for an indomitableness that will not yield. Nature is watching you. The secret self is watching you. Burdens and misfortunes are being placed upon your shoulders for a reason, and if you do not become scared, if you just plain stick in there and refuse to spook, you are satisfying the innermost purposes of life, and soon or later you will be handed the keys to the kingdom of heaven. True and false action. It is not difficult to distinguish between true psychic motivation and false psychic motivation, to be able to recognize when one is following the will of the secret self or simply the dictates of one's own ego. Action that proceeds out of the will of the divine is always dynamic and constructive. It is never ringed around with negative emotions and negative outlooks. It carries with it an inner conviction and absolute serenity, so that the individual knows beyond all doubt that he is following the right course. Conversely, action that comes from the ego is nearly always harassed by doubt. The ego-initiated action is always an end-gaining action. An individual performing at the behest of the ego seldom takes joy from his work or is completely engrossed in it. He seeks only the goal desired by the ego, and this end invariably is glory, riches, power, prestige, or one of the other accoutrements that bedazzle the little self. Still another test that we may apply to the psychic motivation of our actions is whether or not they are effective. Action that is motivated by the secret self invariably is effective. the individual performing under universal will, is irresistible, doing something that must be done. On the other hand, action that is performed under the impulsion of the ego rarely is effective, and then but for that moment, that ego will coincidentally parallels divine will. Such an occurrence is rare indeed, but when it happens, the individual is carried to dizzying heights with an absolutely erroneous idea of how it all happened. He credits his achievement to the use of his ego will, and so he continues to exert it. In consequence, it is not long before he makes an abrupt descent to the place where he started, or even below it, becomes a picture of complete confusion and absolute frustration, and knows not which way to turn. Such men have been known to commit suicide. They are the ones who suddenly seem to lose talent and ability, turn to alcohol and narcotics. But sometimes, if humility becomes ingrained before complete disintegration sets in, they find understanding and are able to remake their lives from the proper psychic position. The general manager is upstairs. Jim was a high-spirited, strong-willed young man, and when he was discharged from the army after World War II, he was offered a television job in a West Coast city. Jim was ambitious and vowed to rise to head his station, then to make it the leader in its market. He worked hard, for he wanted prestige and money, and within 5 years he had attained both. He became general manager of the television station, and it became the leader in its market. During this period, of course, the entire television industry mushroomed. It grew 10 times in size, and those employed in it were carried upward in the process. Then, competition set in. Talent was recruited from advertising agencies, radio stations, motion picture studios, the Broadway stage. Jim watched this influx of new faces and resolved to be better than all, to make more money, to be the leader. He worked around the clock, but nevertheless things began to go badly. No matter how well he laid his plans, something always upset them. No matter how carefully he thought out a process, some unknown factor always cropped up and spoiled it. He began to think he was unlucky. People whom he was positive were inferior often bested him by what seemed an amazing stroke of fortune. He grew bitter, suspicious, and hostile to associates. 2 years later, he was fired. One day, when his spirits were at their lowest ebb and he had about given up, he came across a book that depicted the joys of surrendering one's will to universal will, and since he was about to give up anyway, he decided to try this. He was astounded at the peace and serenity that came to him from the simple act of psychological submission. He took a humble job in a new television station, started on the road back. His friends noticed the change in him. He had ceased being an agitator. He no longer undertook action for the primary reason of getting something done, but now seemed to do things through an inner joy in their actual doing. There was about him a quality of tolerance and understanding, of humility, that made his presence on the team a delight to all. Within a few months he was given a responsible job. Within 2 years he headed the station. The title, General Manager, no longer is on Jim's door, though. Asked why not, he replies, "The General Manager is upstairs." The Eternal Source. Reconditioning wrote, "Let every man remember that the destiny of mankind is incomparable, and let him above all never forget that the divine spark is in him and him alone, and that he is free to disregard it, to kill it, or to come closer to God by showing his eagerness to work with him and for him." This, of course, is the exact psychic position that we must strive for if we would lead an effective and enlightened life. The knowledge of our eternal source and our subsequent identification with it leads us into actions and attitudes that have a broader and more universal viewpoint than any possible to the egoistic self. Our power of decision enables us to grow in any direction that we choose, and once we have shucked off the limiting and restricting presence of the surface self, We then are able to expand into a kind of cosmic perception that enables us to perform all work intuitively and with an effectiveness and skill heretofore denied us. You may be sure that you will not be a victim of lethargy when you surrender your life to the secret self. Instead, you will become much more dynamic. The meaningless pattern of your human existence will be altered completely, and you will come to see the invisible shape of your destiny. When the veil is lifted at last, you will find that the desire to hasten or retard or change events has gone. What will be, and that is enough. Just to be able to recognize that there is a greater plan enables one to abdicate from any attempt to run it. This does not take one out of the arena. It plunges one in more deeply. All that is sacrificed is the limited view of the surface self. Your outer mien may be full of action and thunder and dynamics, but inwardly you are serene, sure about all things, because, as Trimalchio says, our mother, the earth, is in the middle, made round like an egg, and has all good things in herself like a honeycomb. Conditioning the subconscious. As long as we are focused in the sensory area of our awareness, we are never master of our own house, for our true motivations spring out of subterranean areas that we are not aware of and do not control. That is why people often are unable to achieve results through positive thinking. The subconscious always directs us. The conscious mind is only its agent. The more self-sufficient the conscious mind seems, the more it is used as a tool by the subconscious. You cannot issue orders to the subconscious. That is the wrong psychic approach. The subconscious must perceive, then accept. It does not respond to coercion, but even though the conscious mind cannot order the subconscious about, it can condition it to react differently. If a man is fearful, he cannot make himself brave by an act of will, only by conditioning his subconscious to promote feelings of bravery in him. For this reason, periods of meditation are very important. Through them, we can change our awareness of prosperity, health, and happiness as the conscious mind impinges a conditioning quality upon the subconscious. We can choose consciously the path to follow, but only the long lines of it. Our daily choices are enforced in us by the subconscious, for we always act and think intuitively and instinctively. If we are displeased with our actions and our circumstances, we must condition the subconscious to inspire in us different thoughts and different actions. This power of auto-conditioning is available to all. We can accomplish it by daily periods of meditation or simply by keeping within our consciousness at all times an awareness of the thing that we want to become. Realize this. When the chips are flying, we have to go with the personality and sense of self that already has been installed in the subconscious. For in times of action, all our thoughts and movements are instinctive, facing hidden facts. It takes firm-heartedness to face the fact that you have chosen every circumstance and thing in your life, not consciously, of course, but subconsciously. A man who is sick usually is appalled at the idea that he has chosen to be sick, dumbfounded at the effrontery of anyone suggesting that he can get well by simply choosing to be well. If somebody explains the conditioning quality of positive thinking, he sometimes tries it for a time, but usually without visible results, for he thinks positively negatively, is telling himself that he is well, while he knows that he is sick. A man can become well by choosing to become well, but he seldom becomes so the moment after making his choice. It first is necessary for him to embark upon a program of conditioning his consciousness into awareness of health. He has become sick because his consciousness picked up an awareness of sickness, and this must be cast out, replaced, and the task will not be accomplished in a day. Curiously, other persons sometimes have more effect on our subconscious than we ourselves do. A good hypnotist often is able to effect amazing cures. These are usually temporary, however, because the hypnotist's instilled idea is soon dissipated and replaced by the prompter that caused illness in the first place. The individual's conscious mind put the sickness prompter in the subconscious and will continue to do so until the pattern of thinking is changed. Grasping shadows. There is no short and easy road to reconditioning your subconscious. Hypnotism and psychoanalysis are no panaceas. The reconditioning can be done only by yourself, and it takes concentration and continued effort. But there is always the great consolation that in the end you will be master of your own life. It is curious how often the things that we set our minds to evade us. It sometimes seems that the mere act of focusing our attention upon some objective causes that objective to become impossible of accomplishment. Follow a shadow, it still flies you. Seem to fly it, it will pursue. So court a mistress, she denies you. Let her alone, she will court you. Ben Jonson. There is a deep underlying psychological reason why our conscious purposes are often defeated, and that is because they often are at odds with our subconscious purposes. If we fail, it is because we subconsciously wish for failure, even though our conscious minds seem to desire success above all things. But the conscious mind of itself can do nothing. It is always in the grip of the subconscious. It can only condition the subconscious and thereby receive its cooperation in the accomplishment of conscious objectives. All decisions are made subconsciously, and if we do not fight them, they are made swiftly and easily. Attempting to make our choices consciously in the heat of action only sets up conflict between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and in the end, the choice is made by the subconscious anyway. If the choices made by the two minds are opposed, then we may see failure growing out of our efforts at success, or illness growing out of our efforts at health, or hate growing out of our efforts at love. The sphere of effectiveness that the conscious mind has over the subconscious is this. By it, we can choose consciously to become the sort of people we would like to be. We can become courageous and energetic and loyal and trustworthy and full of love and kindness and tolerance by the simple use of conscious conditioning methods, by concentrating our attention on the things we would like to become, by allowing these impressions to seep down to subconscious levels via our imagination. If we do this continually and with regularity, sooner or later we begin to act and think in just the way that our consciousness is focused upon. We then are able to behave in every situation instinctively and naturally, in the manner we always have desired. We literally have remade ourselves in the image of our desires through focusing our attention upon that image and allowing it to seep down into the subconscious. We are able to act and think according to a sense of self that we have made up in our minds. Our power of choice stems from our power to become, and we are always a reflection of an image that we carry in our minds. We can become anything we desire by changing our psychological viewpoint. Clash of opposites. To have a mind is a wondrous thing, but a responsible thing too. Rudyard Kipling wrote, "There are 40 million reasons for failure, but not a single excuse." And when we have come to a realization of the liberating and creative nature of our minds, we soon are made aware that we are finding in the world about us the images projected within consciousness. Take the time and have the courage to face the fact of the power of your choice. You have decided everything that has come into your life by taking a mental stand about it, by allowing that stand to take form and shape in your subconscious, by your willingness to accept it. If you are rich, you have accepted an awareness of abundance. If you are poor, you have accepted an awareness of poverty. If you are well and vigorous, you have accepted an awareness of health. If you are sick, you have accepted an awareness of illness. All of life is the clashing of opposites, the black and white of extremes, the grey area in between. High, low, broad, narrow, dark, light, strength, weakness, always we choose between them. And through our choices, we make ourselves into the kind of people we become and shape the events and circumstances of our lives. No one else is responsible at all, only ourselves. Choice is always with us. We make it and thereby decide our lives and our fate. And that concludes our journey on the power of choice by Uell Stanley Andersen. Andersen's wisdom reminds us that we are not mere victims of circumstance. We are active creators of our own destiny. Remember this: you are the master of your fate, and it all begins with the power of choice. Every decision you make, no matter how small, contributes to the life you create. By cultivating the power of choice, you steer your path toward the reality you desire. Your choices shape your destiny, so choose with purpose and choose wisely. Always remember that the life you envision is within your control. Thank you for joining Wisdom Matrix 1111 on this journey. Please help support the channel by liking the video and hitting the subscribe button. Until next time, may you master the power of your choices to create the life you truly desire, wonderfully. Peace.